I'll never forget that night. It was a cold November evening and I had been out at a party with some friends. It was fun, but by the time it was over, I was exhausted and just wanted to go home. I'd had a few drinks, but I wasn't drunk, just tipsy enough to relax, you know? I called a taxi because it was too late to take the bus. When the taxi pulled up, I remember thinking the car looked old, almost beat up. The driver was this middle-aged guy, looked kind of normal, scruffy beard, tired eyes. I didn't think much of it, but something about him just felt off. I ignored it, told myself I was just tired, and got in. At first, everything seemed fine. He didn't talk much, just muttered something like, "Good night to be out, isn't it?" I just nodded and stared at my phone, hoping I'd be home soon. But then, after a few minutes, I noticed we weren't taking the usual route. He'd gone completely off course, heading down some dark, unfamiliar streets. That's when the panic started to creep in. I asked him if he missed the turn, but he didn't respond, just kept driving. I asked again, trying to stay calm, and this time he glanced at me in the mirror, his eyes cold. He said, "This way's quicker." But I knew it wasn't. I knew something was wrong. My heart was racing at that point. I kept checking my phone, watching the little blue dot move further away from where I was supposed to be going. I asked him to turn around, but he didn't listen. Then he said something that sent chills down my spine. He said, "You know, it's not always safe for a young woman to be out alone at night. Anything could happen. You never know who's behind the wheel." I'll never forget the way he said it, so calm, like he was enjoying watching me panic. I texted my friend telling her where I was and pressed the emergency button on the app. I didn't care if he saw, I just needed help. Suddenly, the car screeched to a stop on this dark, narrow road. He turned around and stared at me, his voice low. "Get out," he said. I hesitated and he shouted, "I said get out!" I didn't wait. I unlocked the door and ran as fast as I could. I didn't look back until I found a gas station. The guy behind the counter called the police, but by the time they arrived, the driver was long gone. They never found him. I don't know what his plan was, but I do know one thing. I'll never forget the fear of being trapped in that car, knowing something terrible was about to happen. I had just finished one of those long, exhausting shifts, you know. It was around 1:30 in the morning and I was dead tired, just wanting to get home. I called a taxi like I always did after work. The car pulled up and everything seemed normal. Nice, clean car, and the driver was this young guy, maybe in his late 20s. He smiled and asked, "Rough night?" I just nodded, too tired to really chat. As we were driving, I wasn't paying much attention at first. I was half asleep in the back seat, but then I noticed he missed the exit. I didn't think much of it at first, figured maybe he knew a better way, but after a few minutes I realized we were completely off course. I checked the GPS on my phone and he was going in the opposite direction from where I lived. I spoke up, told him he missed the turn, but he just gave me this weird look in the rearview mirror and said, "Don't worry, I know a shortcut." That's when I started to get nervous. I didn't want a shortcut. I wanted to go home the normal way. I told him again, firmer this time, "Just follow the GPS, man." But he didn't. He just kept driving, faster now, taking these dark, empty roads outside of town. At that point, I was wide awake, my heart pounding. I tried to stay calm, but every instinct was telling me something was very wrong. I asked him to stop the car, said I'd find another ride. He ignored me. The silence in the car was suffocating, and I could feel the tension growing. I tried to open the door, but it was locked. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what to do. Then, out of nowhere, he started talking. He said, "You ever wonder what would happen if someone just disappeared? Like, what if you never made it home tonight? No one would find you out here, you know." I froze. Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. I reached for my phone, tried to call 911, but before I could, he swerved off the road and into this abandoned parking lot, surrounded by trees. The car came to a stop and he turned around, staring at me with this eerie calmness. "You should have just kept quiet," he said, reaching for something in the glove box. I don't know what came over me, but I acted without thinking. I unlocked the door manually and threw myself out of the car, running as fast as I could. I could hear him shouting behind me, but I didn't stop. I ran and ran until I saw lights from a diner down the road. I ran inside, shaking, barely able to explain what had happened. They called the police, but the driver was gone by the time they got there. That ride still haunts me. It was the closest I've ever come to real danger, and I still don't know what he was planning. But I know this. If I hadn't gotten out of that car, I might not be here to tell this story.